episode number 53 of On the Back Hash, where we talk about things in the pageantry. 53, man. It's almost as old as Will.
You got jokes for being barely a month over.
Not exactly a month. My name is Cedric, and joining with me today is Chris and Will, and we also have a very special guest. You might have seen him around on a football field wearing a green shirt in DCI, or maybe sitting in a judge's box in the gym for WGI, or maybe in a press box at your high school stadium. We have Mr. Stephen Page with us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well.
Awesome. So as I alluded, Mr. Page has been a adjudicator for the pageantry arts for many, many years. I've had the pleasure of having him judge my groups before, both bands and drumlines, and really always appreciate his perspective and his commentary. He's always helped out the kids. So I thought he'd be a great person to have on here, kind of pick his brain a little bit and kind of go from there. So why don't you kind of start off telling us about yourself and what you do and all that stuff?
Yeah, this is my 25th year teaching, all 25 years in Kentucky. I've been at Heath Middle School, which is just outside of Paducah, for the last 10 years. I teach band and choir. I've got three choir classes, 3 band classes, and I taught high school for 15 years and a little bit outside of Lexington, and 4 years in Henderson. And then I've been in Paducah ever since. Reedland High School for 3 years before it closed, and then 1 year at McCracken County High School, and now been at Heath for 10 years.
Wow.
It's been an adventure. Yeah.
Sure. I didn't know you were in the Lexington area.
My first 7 years were at West Jessamine in Nicholasville, just south of Lexington. Mm-hmm. Started there right out of school, and was there doing middle school and high school for 7 years, and really loved it. But Henderson County opened up, and I interviewed there, and I knew it was a bigger school, and it was closer to my hometown of Paducah. Mm. And so I got offered that job and taught there for 4 years, and loved that too. There was some real positives both places.
Yeah, I did not know that. Because I just assumed, because I was like in high school and college, I think around that time you were doing all of that stuff. So I didn't have my pulse on things at that point in time.
Right. Yeah, it almost seems like a whole different life then. I was state band chair when I was, I think, 29 or 30. Like I was organizing all state band in my 7th or 8th year of teaching. I guess I was 32. Okay. And but it seems like a different life now. That's been a long. 15 years doesn't seem like a long time, but man, there's been a lot go down in 15 years.
Yes,
we already know. I promise you.
Yep.
A lot of stuff. So, a lot of people may not have knew about the teaching, the middle school aspect of things, and you teach choir too. So, like, you're talking about being a big difference and almost a different life. Like, kind of explain to people like the difference between being a middle school teacher and how music programs for that stuff work in comparison to like being a high school teacher, because it is two completely different worlds.
And everybody understands, I think, a lot about just the high school lifestyle. I really love the connection with kids. I really love the process of teaching great literature, and I really miss that. And I miss the aspect of watching a show kind of develop. Like you get the idea for like, all right, this, here's the concept of the show, here's the music, where a show sits in March, and then you get the writers and you get that going in the spring and the summer, and then you start setting dots and you realize in August, okay, we got to change this, and then this changes and this transition's different. I really miss that process of watching. How do you get to October? How do you get that step from February to October? That's probably the part I miss the most of high school. But we've got a big family, and knowing that I was not the guy to keep the high school at McCracken County, I was not going to be the guy if they wanted to have a big time competitive band, and we were expecting our 7th or 8th child at the time. And so the opportunity to teach middle school that opened up, and really, I don't. I, except for the show design and the quality lit, I really dig teaching middle school. Had no idea I'd be teaching choir. Um,
Mm.
that was just kind of like when the job opened, they're like, all right, here's your schedule, and the principal tells you what you're teaching, and you go and teach it, and that's the way it is for most people. But it took me a while to really figure out how to teach choir. There's some similarities to teaching band, but it's different. It's a
Yeah.
different beast for sure. And I wouldn't say I've figured it out, but I've learned a lot in these last 10 years about how to do it.
Did it like freak you out, or did you want to like? I don't know. Like, can you negotiate to not teach
I
class?
think
I mean, I don't know.
the biggest struggle for me at first, when the kids just walk into the room, a big difference is the percentage of kids that are just doing it for a class that don't
Mm-hmm.
really have investment. That's a big difference.
Mm.
I'd say in the typical high school band, you've got 10% of the kids that are just kind of there because their friends are.
Mm-hmm.
Middle school band, you probably got a quarter of the kids that are just there because they needed a class to take. But in middle school choir, family's not buying an instrument. You can join in eighth grade with no experience and get caught up real quickly. So I'd say on any given day, there's half of the class that's just in there because they needed something to take fifth hour, and so
Mm.
convincing them to try and put forth some effort for those 48 minutes or 52 minutes or whatever, that's the challenge. You kind of have to trick the kids on a daily basis. Getting used to that's a big change. And then I didn't realize how much it's really not just the notes and rhythms. Like there's
Mm.
so much involving sound
Mm-hmm.
and how they produce the sound and how they get vowels to match. And it's just, I thought, well, we're singing the right notes. We're singing two parts or three parts. I guess we sound good. And
Right.
then you're like, no, it doesn't sound good. There's these 10 other steps, and it took me a while to figure it out. But I think I've got a handle on it. I'm comfortable teaching choir.
Plus,
Wow.
Yeah.
middle schoolers are just weird.
Yes.
Oh yeah, oh
Listen.
yeah.
I mean,
Listen.
let's not forget that
Listen.
middle school is a weird time.
It really is, and I try to think back. It was hard. It's a hard time for me, and I've had a middle schooler living in my house for the last 7 or 8 years, and I'll have another one living in my house for the next 7 or 8 years because our family has a wide range of ages. So it's a weird time.
Yeah, choir is a lot more personal because their instrument is them. So you
Yeah,
can't blame it on the instrument, because if you do, it's like, well, I'm blaming it on the person. And then being middle schoolers, you have to be sensitive and thoughtful about how you approach, fixing that stuff. So it's tough. But I would say you probably had something figured out, being that your
I
choir
did.
sung at KMEA.
Don't
My eighth grade
blame
choir
me.
last year, we were singing four parts, and we sang at conference, and they were a good bunch. This year's eighth grade, um, they're not as independent. Getting them to split up on three parts takes a little trick. I kind of tricked them. Okay, now we're singing three parts, but their tone is good. There's 50 of them in eighth grade, and they've got a good sound. So it's yeah, I've figured out something, and I tell you the best part of it is well, like just from a logistically, you just get on the bus. Like when
Mhm.
you're going to assessment, you don't have to check to be sure that that did the cymbals get loaded. Does the tuba player have the music? You just get on the bus.
Mm-hmm.
And I also love it that every time we performed, it's memorized, and
Mhm.
so kids are watching me at every moment. And if a kid takes
Mm.
their eyes off me, I stop and we start over. And there's no question that we're going to stay together because literally everyone is watching me. That's really nice.
Yeah,
Mm.
I bet that helps a lot. Anything from teaching choir that you've been able to shift over to the band side of things?
Um, you know, Support, just like breath support, that matters for sure. And I think there's a lot to understand. In choir, we never get out of tuner. Like they're in tune or they're not, and the
Mm-hmm.
kids can hear that. And I think probably that's reminded me that seldom do the best groups live off their tuner. The tuner's the reference, but it's really coming from, are the kids listening and do they know how to adjust on their instrument? And so even though I don't teach them how to sing in tune, they naturally do it. And I think we could do more of that in the band world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it
Say
seems.
that's one
Oh, go ahead.
thing. Like, I was never in a vocal ensemble until college, and I took men's chorus one semester. And after being in that ensemble, my ear for concert band and lessons and everything just completely changed.
Yep.
And it's because you had to use your ears so much. And
Yep.
you should be using your ears all the time in the band setting too, but we forget about that a lot. But like just for me personally, like when I got back, I was able to hear myself and the people around me and make adjustments based off of just having that experience.
It's nice that choir kids also they we sing the solfege so much that
Hmm.
you can tell a kid, no, altos, you're on so right here. And the altos will understand. They don't understand that the fifth locks in with this and we have to raise it to get it perfectly. They don't understand that. But if they all know where do is, then they can find so and they can understand that. And so I can just throw out words real quick. No, no baritones, you're on do. And they can fix it. And sometimes in the band world, if you tell the trombones, guys, y'all have the fifth, a couple of the kids are going to get that. But in the typical
You mean
seventh
fifth
grade band,
position?
yeah,
Wait a
right, right.
minute.
The typical seventh grade band,
Mhm.
half the trombones will have no idea what you're talking about when you say the fifth. But if in a seventh
Hmm.
grade choir, if you say baritones, you all are singing so, most of them know kind of what I'm talking about. That's a nice part of it.
Yeah, it's those acquired ears are a little bit underrated because, like you said, they don't have
Hmm.
when they're out of tune, they just know it. When somebody's out,
Yep.
they know it immediately. And I think sometimes with your younger band students, they get a little bit consumed with the instrument and getting a good sound out of an instrument.
Hmm.
That if it's a sound, that's all they care about. They're not really they're in their bubble and not playing with their ensemble. So
Yeah.
completely makes sense. Completely makes sense. So. So how did you get into judging? Like, how did that
Oh man,
all start?
Oh boy.
it's the
And I'm going to
craziest
take
story.
notes because
Listen.
Yeah, it's a crazy story, and in a
Tag
way, I
time.
think it's probably the anybody that says there's politics in the big time judging community, I am exhibition A that it's really limited because if a middle school choir director in Paducah can judge Saturday night of DCI, like I have no connection to anybody. I've never taught at a suburb school in Dallas. I've never been a caption head of an open class. I've like that's not me. And so like some people may think, well, they just get hired because this guy writes these people's show and this person owes this person a favor, but I'm literally just a dad teaching middle school choir in Paducah. And the only
Mm.
way I've gotten to this point is because I try to really take feedback well and I do a decent job, but there's no political favors of Stephen rose through the ranks because he's this guy's son or he worked for this corps or this. I'm just a dude that's tried really hard. um Gosh, I marched Phantom in '95 and didn't love it, but I kind of knew I had to do that if I was going to become the next great band director. Because when I was, a 20-year-old, that's what I thought my life calling was to be. I was going to be the next. I was going to be the next dude to play at Midwest and make Grand Nats finals. I marched regiment because in the Midwest you could either drive to Scouts or Cavies or regiment. Those were the big three in the Midwest at that time. And being a trombone player, regiment just had that low brass sound. And Cavies and Scouts to me were guard or soprano trumpet corps, and regiment was the low brass corps. So I marched regiment, and it was a good experience. Made some friends, but I didn't love it. Would have aged out in '96, which is probably the best drum corps show of all time. The Rachmaninoff or the Shostakovich show,
the
but
Defiant Heart,
my
right?
yeah, the Defiant Heart, love it. My that would have been my age out year. I didn't march that year. My girlfriend and now wife of 24 years, she had enough of me being gone the previous summer, so I didn't march. Um, and then in '97, I really missed the drum corps experience, and I got a job as a visual tech for Pioneer. John Fannin, that teaches at Murray State, was the program coordinator for Pioneer.
I
And
did
even
not
though I
know
wasn't
that.
really Yeah, he was the program coordinator in
Hmm.
'97. It was the first year they went Division One because they had been real successful Division Three, Division Two, and
Hmm.
they went Division One in
Yep.
'97. They did a river dance show, and
Hmm.
Mike Pote was the brass caption head, and John Fannin was the program coordinator, and they had a full 60 in the horn line, and
Hmm.
it didn't work out. It wasn't as good of a core as it should have been. But I loved being on tour and met some people and wasn't I was never like the visual guy. Like because I can communicate and teach, I was a really good tech. You know, I could get kids feet in time and I was a good visual tech, but I wasn't a visual guy. 98, there's a lot of turnover at Pioneer, but I went back and was another visual tech. But you know, a lot of it I was responsible. I showed up to rehearsals. I worked my butt off, and in '99 I was the caption head of like Pioneer, and it was the first year they ever made. It was the first year they ever made semifinals. They were 17th that year, and you know, it was just typical Irish show. There was nothing significant about Pioneer in '99. But I was the visual caption head, and got married that summer, and I was like, okay, I'm done with drum corps. I helped out a little bit when Southwind was in Lexington, 2000, 2001, and a Paducah guy, Ron Ruggles, who was a DCM judge for a long time, visual guy, great guy. I taught his daughters; they were at Pioneer, and he was like, "Hey, you ought to think about judging. No, you can't be on the road. You're teaching now, and you're married. You can't spend the summer on the road, but you ought to think about judging." So in 2001, I did some trial judging for DCM, and in 2002, judged 4 or 5 DCM shows. And I knew that I needed to do brass, just because brass doesn't really change. Like the visual world changes a lot, and not having any guard chops, I knew that I wouldn't really be able to keep up in the visual world. Um, but I knew the brass world, you know, playing well is just playing well.
Yeah.
And so I trialed as a brass judge, and that was did a few real shows in '02, and then DCM folded in like in '03 or '04. And there were 3 of us that were brand new DCM judges that got assignments in DCI the next year. And most of the people that were only DCM judges didn't get any DCI assignments. Like they were just kind of like, okay, DCM's done. But it was myself and Andy Cook and Kyle Young that both teach at Carmel. And the 3 of us were brand new judges. I guess I was 27. Yeah, I was 27 in '02, '03, '28. And we all got a few DCI shows that year. And just gradually over time, you know, it's a balance. If you judge 20 cores on average, you're gonna piss off 10 of them, and
Hmm.
you're gonna appeal to 10 of them. You know, that's just on average. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think over time, if you judge 20 cores and at the end of the summer, 12 of them think you did a good job, and you only pissed off 8 of them, then you must at least be, when you give somebody a number they don't like, at least you're also giving them some useful feedback, and they believe your commentary is genuine. So just over time, I kept doing more and more, and then gradually I started doing more in the fall. When you're teaching competitive high school, you've only got 2 or 3 free Saturdays in the fall. But once I started doing middle school, I had more time to judge in the fall, and so now it's pretty much every Saturday.
Yeah. Every time I see something on Facebook, you're in another state or somewhere running. Uh,
Every Saturday. It was Indy yesterday, and it'll be Peoria next weekend, and every Saturday just about till Thanksgiving.
Now, are you part of a judges association or are you just freelance?
No, I did Central States when I lived in Nicholasville. When I lived in Lexington, I was a member of CSJA. I guess technically I still am. Um, I loved I love doing the mid-state shows because there's some pretty creative shows in that mid-state circuit, especially, and there's obviously some great guards. But they would never release your assignments until August,
Mm,
and um, I'm already booked for. I've got one free weekend in 24, but pretty much I'm booked a year or two ahead of time, and I just couldn't wait until August of the current year. I was just constantly turning people down. I was like, well, I might be doing a CSJA show that weekend, and so I haven't really done anything for Central States in probably the last 7 or 8 years. So I'm not really a member of an association. WGI. I haven't done any WGI stuff. I do 7 or 8 shows every winter, but it's always just a couple of IPA, couple of SCGC, couple with this different circuits contact me. So it's all pretty much just freelance. People reach out, and that's how it works out.
Awesome.
Wow.
I think that's a testament to like just how well you do your job, and to be able to not have to be associated with a particular association, but be booked a year and a half out in advance. And
Yeah.
And thank you. I try to also, I try to get better. Like I'll listen. That's the nice thing about Competition Suite. Like I was driving home this morning from Indy, and a couple of bands that I help, I went back and listened to a few tapes that they had gotten yesterday, and then I went back and listened to a couple of my own tapes. Just to be like, was I hyping on this one thing way too much? Was I clear when I was saying this? And also we'll listen to some friends' tapes. Like the show I judged yesterday, I can hear everyone else's commentary from that show, and so I could be like, oh, let me listen to 3 or 4 minutes of this judge's commentary, and let me pick up what I can from this person.
yeah, I've done that a couple of times. Go back and listen to some old tapes just to like, all right, how much of an idiot do I sound like when I'm talking to folks?
And it's tough. You don't want to be too judgmental, but I think a lot of people get wrapped up in using big words when it's not really necessary, and like you can just simply say the trumpets are sharp. You don't have to. Sometimes people will be like talking about the enliven the air all the way through to the completion of the resonance, and sometimes you just gotta be like, these kids got to hold this note out all the way to 4.
Like I'm gonna need you to breathe.
Yeah.
I try to put it on a level that if you play the tape for the kids, even the 8th grader knows exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think the hardest words you should use are actually on the sheet, like and then anything past that, okay, how can I break this down into layman's terms? Because every now and then you'll get that judge that they're just staring at the sheet, and they are.
They're literally using words exactly off the sheet. You got to know your audience.
Yes.
Last night Jasper, like I was doing music effect, and Jasper is one of the strongest bands, for their size, and they're great. They won Class B in Indiana last year. They're just a great program. I don't, if I'm doing effect, I know the kids aren't going to listen to that tape, and I know that when there's an obvious, if there's an obvious tempo tear, the staff, which are all really bright folks, they don't need me to go on about the tempo tear. So instead, I'm going to talk about the balance here is a little off, and it's making me think one thing's the melody, and that's not what you want me to think is the melody. But if I'm making a tape for a small band with young kids and a young teacher, it's a whole different kind of terminology. So you got to know your audience.
I agree. So when you got the call, if it was a call, I don't know if it was a call or not, that you were judging finals at DCI last year, like excited or just like, okay, cool, or what?
Do any of y'all know how they do all that?
No.
Okay, it's beautiful. You can look at your assignments. You get your assignments March, April. You can look at your assignments and kind of speculate. If you're doing San Antonio, if you're doing Atlanta, you can kind of be like, hey, there's a chance I'm also doing Indy. You don't find out for sure you're doing Indy until really halfway through the summer. Halfway through the summer, there'll be an email with everybody on blind CC saying, congratulations, your championships, but you don't find out which night. And the Wednesday night of championships is when they announce, and there's a banquet, and all the judges that judged open class up in Michigan City or Marion, they're all there, and everybody that's going to be judging Thursday, Friday, Saturday, there's a banquet in Indy, and it's fun because you're there with all your friends. And then once you're done with the food, and they thank all the different people, and then they're like, okay, here's the panel for Thursday night, and everybody is sitting there in the room, and there's a group of like 7 or 8 people that go through that decision, and I think I've judged at championships. I think 8 or 10 times for Worlds, and like I have never known. Like you can speculate. I bet I'm doing Thursday because I've seen a lot of the open class cores and these other guys haven't. But you don't really know what you're doing, and some people don't even know which caption they're doing. Like I've always been the field brass guy, so I knew I was going to be on the field. But you don't know if you're doing Thursday, Friday, Saturday until the PowerPoint slide gets clicked up there. There's a lot of times it didn't happen the last couple of years, but a lot of times they'll give you all like a little gift. Like it'll be like a DCI umbrella or a little tote bag. So like the tote bag will have a ribbon around it, and then there'll be like a little thank you card on the ribbon, and it'll have a quarter note. And then you notice, oh, 8 of the people, their tote bag has a quarter note. And if you look, there's a guard person that's got a quarter note, and then you look around the room, you're like, oh, here's 8 of us that have a dotted 16th pattern written on their thank you card. And like everybody's trying to speculate. Okay, dotted 16th means you're doing this night. Quarter note means you're doing this night. But yeah, when it was the year I judged finals, 22. And I had done Thursday 3 or 4 times, and I had done Friday 3 or 4 times, and I had never done Saturday. But I was honestly surprised. Like I did not expect it. And so yeah, when I saw it, it was a blast. I knew it was going to be a blast, and especially when you're judging brass, like there's not really a lot of decision to make. I mean, the horn line they tell you what score to put. You know, at that point, if they have a great show, you may know going in, okay, these kids at their best are going to be a 19.8. At their worst, they're going to be a 19.2, but they're going to be in that range. Let's hear the show. Let's see how they play. And you know, there wasn't a lot of pressure for me that night judging finals. It was sheer enjoyment. Like, let's go out there and just let the kids tell me what to do. In my situation, you know, in Kentucky, we start school so soon. That was like our second day of school. And I was in Indy. It's 4.5 hours from Paducah. So I saw the announcement, texted my wife, and then jumped in the car, drove back home, taught Thursday, taught Friday, went back to Indy Friday night. Yeah.
We were on the road at the same time then.
Yeah, and that's usually how it goes. You know, most people have to fly to Indy, and you know, when they fly in, whether it's Tuesday night or Wednesday morning, they fly into Indy, and they're kind of there in Indy for the week. And you know, someday when I retire, I'd love to do that. Or if we didn't start school in early August, I'd love to hang out. But you can't. You know, when I have to miss the days I've judged Thursday or Friday, I just had to miss school, you know, but days that I don't have to miss, you don't want to miss the second day of school. That's awkward for the admin and the sub and the kids. And so I saw that I was judging Saturday, and I was like, all right, guys, today was our first day of school. You know, I taught school that Wednesday, drove up there, went to the banquet, heard that I was judging Saturday, and I was like, all right, deuces. And I jumped in my car, drove back home, taught Thursday and Friday. It was really one of the cool things is that was such a busy time, you know, hopping in the car, driving home, sleeping a few hours, teaching Thursday. And, you know, Thursday was our second day of school, which was like handing out music, fixing reeds, you know, flute springs had popped off, and you're trying to pull as many beginners in, you know, instrument testing.
Yep.
And then life's super busy, you know, whether we've got, you know, my own family. And then Friday was busy, and I was packing and got in the car Friday afternoon and drove straight to Indy, and, you know, got there Friday night and saw the Blue Coats alumni corps, and then went and hung out with my friends. And I had made it all the way to Saturday morning, never seeing a recap. And so like I knew the placements, but I had no idea what the other 2 judges had done from a brass standpoint. And I realized it sometime on Saturday morning. And I was like, well, if I've made it this far with no idea about brass scores, I can make it the next 4 or 5 hours. And so I did. And I got to go into it. And I was thankful. It worked out that way, that I got to go into finals night having no idea who was in line for top brass, you know. So I just got to go in, put down a number, and feel no pressure of, you know, making a decision. Now I loved it that it worked out that way.
That was awesome. When I first started noticing, like, you know, the judges and kind of figuring out who was, and then I saw S. Page a few years ago, and I was like, ain't no way I know that guy. And then you figured out she was like, oh, okay, that's super cool. And then for you to see you judging finals night, like
Hmm.
in my brain, I physically remember seeing you standing in front of the brass line of Boston.
Yeah.
Um, when what happened? I guess it sounded like a tear to us,
Yeah.
or a small tear, and I just was like, he's right in front of them for that. Like
Well, and
that's insane.
and honestly, um, things like that, it's such a different perspective on the field than in the box. And really, Ensemble Pulse is not too much of a music performance, an individual sheet kind of issue. So
Hmm.
I get to ignore that. And when the synth is too loud, being on the field, you don't worry about it. You
Mm.
watch the kids move and see how well they play. And I love judging on the field. This past summer, I did mostly, music analysis, which is kind of like a music ensemble, but it's a different kind of thing. You got to have your brain engaged a lot more doing music analysis than you do music brass.
Mm.
So, did you kind of take a step back from judging as much DCI this year?
Yeah, I did. I did 4 shows. I was in Europe for 2 weeks, and when I do this Europe trip, it takes me out of the country pretty much from the beginning of the season till July 15th. And so the earliest show I could do would be July 16th, and it's good if you're gonna do a show at the end of the year. It's good for you to have had an early read
Hmm.
with critique, so the judges can all, or so the chorus can all have a little FaceTime with you. Um, so it usually works out that I'll judge a lot one summer, and then the next summer I'll be traveling a lot and won't do as many shows. I still did open class. I did prelims for open championships in Marion. So that was cool to still be involved with championships week.
Mm.
Cool. And I think so. Yeah, okay, I do remember. I think is that Kentucky ambassador trip to Europe that
Yes.
they take up? Yes, okay,
Yep. That's it.
cool. I, I, they tried to reach. I think one year we sent a kid. I don't know if we got to
I
send a whole
think we
bunch.
had 4 kids on that trip. If it's the same one, I think we had four kids
It's
on
the same
our
one. I'm
group.
pretty sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a great experience. It's expensive, but it's a great time for the kids. I did my first trip in 2006, and got to take a couple of my own kids with me this summer, and it's just an awesome time. And if if it means judging a little less every other summer, that's okay with me.
Yeah.
Awesome. Y'all got any more questions around the judging thing before I kind of shift gears a little bit?
I just think it's kind of cool. It's like you're on an episode of Oprah and you find out if you're judging finals or not.
It
Like
it really is
You
cool.
get to judge, and
you
you get
get
to
to judge, yeah.
And like
Everybody look under your seat, and if you have a gold star,
the way it works out with me living drivable and still teaching, um it's a different, every scenario is different, and so I have to
hmm
pack going to Indy not knowing, like maybe I drive up there on Wednesday and I go to the banquet and I find out I'm judging the next day. Then I text my family and I text my principal, and I'll stay there in the hotel, and then I'll get up the next day and judge all day. And sometimes I'll judge all day and then like try to get home to be at school on Friday. Or there've been some years where I'll go home and teach Thursday and then come back up and judge Friday and stay Saturday. There's so many variables in terms of just like personal travel.
That's
That's one of
crazy.
the main reasons. One of the main reasons I'll retire as soon as I hit 27 years is because the judging life will be so much easier.
Mm.
Yeah, and going back to something you said a while ago, I know you keep saying, you as a judge, you want to continue to get better and you want to grow. And I know this past season you got to see us at one of our indoor contests. He's like, this is not my typical caption. So if
Yep.
there's something that you can tell me, or a lot of judges won't do that. Like they just, well, I'm here, I'm paid to do a job, and I'm just gonna, what I say it is what it is, and to know that you weren't in your, because I'm not gonna lie, when I saw it, I was just like, he typically does effect.
Oh yeah.
This
Oh yeah.
this is different.
Uh-huh.
Uh, But the fact that you're willing to go and put yourself out there and be vulnerable in that moment, because a lot of folks wouldn't, they
I learned a
wouldn't do
lot.
that.
I learned a lot, honestly, sitting in critique. Like just yesterday, we had all the music panel together. There were 18 bands at this show in Indy, and none of them were Grand Nats finalists. But there were probably, of those 18, 7 or 8 will make finals in Indianapolis, and there's probably one Class A, maybe 2 Class A finalists, and certainly a Class B finalist or two. There were some strong bands there, but the judging panel, Beth Fabrizio was on the field, and I've known Beth for years, and Julie Davila, whose primary is percussion, she was doing music ensemble, and I was
Hmm.
doing effect. So sitting there in critique, um, I could hear the stuff that she was saying from music ensemble tape to the percussion, and kind of like playing that back in my head. Yes, I noticed that. No, I didn't notice that. It's just trying to become more aware of the full all the terminology. I got a comment. I do a lot of clinics this time of year. I went to 4 rehearsals last week, and I've got 4 rehearsals coming up with bands this next week. But Monday or Tuesday, one day last week, I was at a rehearsal, and towards the end of rehearsal, one of the techs was like, "I didn't realize that percussion was your primary instrument," and I was like, "It's not." I was like, "Trombone, trombone is my primary instrument." But I've tried to learn so much from listening to other percussionists that I think probably sometimes I might even skew too much towards that. But that's the activity right now. If a music judge is not talking about percussion and a visual judge is not talking about guard, they're not doing it.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's so weird because we used to complain about this all the time, and I think we just kind of got muted about it. But it was just like the only time they ever said anything about percussion was it's too loud.
Yeah.
Like
Hmm.
and there used to be a lot of times where like there's a lot of good musical design that's happening in the percussion section that they're not getting any credit for because they're blending and they're balancing and doing what they're not being a distraction. Um, and it's starting to get a little bit better. Um,
It's
but
usually, honestly, it's not usually too loud. It's too
mhm,
dense. That's
yes.
the problem. There's usually too much density, and the writer has written the mallet book not as subordinate to the horns. The mallet, there's just so much thick percussion scoring, that that you don't have to have 90% of a snare book. I should be able to play. Not clean and not traditional, but like 90% of a snare book should be accompaniment to wherever the melody is. And then 10% of a snare book should be something that I can't even read. It's I can't even read it. But there's so much just dense, thick percussion writing. And there's some people that definitely do it right, man. There's some just great, brilliant writers out there that are putting out really musical books.
um, kind of kind of along those lines, like you were saying, is one of the factors that kind of separates groups from me pretty easily when I'm judging in the percussion box is the percussion design or the orchestration or like how it's written because you can tell somebody who has custom written stuff that makes sure everybody's doing their job and it's written towards the band as
Hmm.
opposed to something that's stock written or written battery heavy with no front ensemble contribution or vice versa.
Hmm.
Um, for me, that it's my score. Like most groups can play, and most groups are going to play what they're being asked to play, but it's what they're being asked to play quality stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Is
so
is
when
there
I'm
opportunities? Is there opportunities for them to be musicians in the
mhm.
book? You know,
Yeah.
and is there variety? Is what they're doing changing from phrase to phrase, or is it super repetitive? A lot of that stuff goes into percussion writing.
Mm.
So, um, but yeah, so I mean, it kills me listening to music judges tapes sometimes, or sometimes even visual tapes. Listening to them talking about the percussion, it's like, well, they're out of step. And like, okay, so it's half the band. How's their
Hmm.
Yeah,
carriage? How's their
Right.
technique?
Hmm.
They
Right.
do body too.
Yeah.
Um, it's a lot that goes into it, and you hope that they catch it all, and maybe not even comment on it, but at the end of the year, be like, I did notice this. Thank you for doing that type of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, which kind of a good segue into kind of what I was kind of want to talk about next is just kind of what are things, and we'll start with some good things. What are some good smart things that you're starting to see? You know, not only your top notch bands, but your bands that that can compete. They're not going to be your BOA, finals bands, but like, what are some good things that they're doing from a design standpoint, or just from a teaching standpoint to make their marching band shows kind of pop?
I think people are incorporating body way smarter. I think when they're asking the kids to do more simultaneous demand stuff, it's stuff that makes sense, and it's not just like aggressive horn moves from 1998. Like they're doing stuff that's logical. Um, I've been impressed lately at how a lot of kids, there'll be horn books that aren't written in a way to just have constant sound. Like when there's a woodwind feature and it's logical and it's challenging to the woodwinds, and there's a brass feature, and there's not just 2D ensemble playing all the time. Because like Beethoven didn't do that. Beethoven did not write for the full orchestra the entire time. And so there's no reason for us to orchestrate for marching bands with everybody playing all the time. So the average show nowadays, I think, has section features. And then when there's an impact moment, everybody's playing, everybody's drumming. I
Mm-hmm.
think I think I think it's really easy nowadays to get a good wind book. I think if you're not buying a good wind book, then you're not trying. There's a lot of really good, and I don't want to say they're stock arrangements, but there's 8 or 10 people writing shows that are really playable shows that's the music people ought to be playing.
Okay. And then what about, you kind of alluded to that from the body standpoint. What about drill? Because we've talked about this as far
Mm,
as that, how what the function of drill has changed
yeah.
over the past 10 to 15, 20 years. Um, how do you see that kind of working in the high school world now?
Yeah, drill is a tough thing. The whole like, do you write the guard work and then have the drill written, or do you get the drill and then write the guard work at the last minute? That's a problem that is just a hard thing for the average group. Now, the 5% of the world that has 10 alternates on the sideline and they know their drill numbers in April. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the 95% of the rest of the world that is essentially still figuring out their numbers in July, and their numbers are going to change because they don't have alternates. So yeah, that's most of us. So do you want to send the count, the count breakdown to the drill writer and have them take their time to write some good drill in June, but then you find out that then that makes the guard book have to be written essentially at band camp, and that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't get the time. Or do you have the guard book written in May and June, and then you get the guard writer has to talk to the drill writer and say, oh, by the way, these 24 counts the guard has to be holding, and
Mm-hmm.
these 24 counts they have to be in a pod in the front to be in a dance block. Like
It's
that's a
terrible.
hard thing. There's not an easy answer. There's for the 95% of us that's just a hard thing.
All my guard friends will tell you that they want the drill first, and then
Yeah,
they write their book.
yeah. That's
It,
what works best. And if you've
mm-hmm.
got the staff to keep, if you get the drill and then you give the guard staff 2 days to write some work, that's ideal. But that means that during those 2 days, you've got somebody else doing fundamentals with the kids. That
Mm-hmm.
you're not just leaving the kids to watch Home Alone while you're sitting there in the other side of the gym coming up with
Listen.
the guard work. Or, and it's not ideal to also ask the guard staff to teach 8 hours and then go home and write work for 4 hours. Like That's not really
Mm-hmm.
professionalizing our activity if we're expecting,
Hmm.
18-hour days from the staff either. So that's a problem. That getting the best vehicle and content to the kids when there's that timing breakdown that's numbers dependent. Um, that's a problem.
Mm.
Yeah, the past few years I've noticed that, kind of with our design and whenever we do stuff, it's just like, all right, they want to write work, but we need numbers, but we can't get numbers until we know what's going on. And it's just this balance. And then once you get all of this set, it's like, well, how long does it take to teach choreography
Hmm.
and learn the drill and still have a life outside of marching band? Because, that's important too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's such a hard balance. And you don't want to take 8 kids, but only 4 of them are marching or 6 of them are marching, and just have 2 of them being alternate the whole time, just so that it's tough, man. And marching band is, I love the activity, but man, it almost seems like to do it right, there's a lot of investment, time wise, resources wise, to make it
It's
happen.
a it's a flawed activity, and the places that are able to do it right, um, it's really impressive, and I don't
Mm.
want to, and it's not luck that those places do it right. Like it's been set up
Mm-hmm.
honestly for generations. Like
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
been going right at those places for generations, and they've got a lot of kids, and they got the right staff that want to teach there, and it's just impressive. You've got to give it up for those places that are doing it right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
For sure. All right, what are some of your pet peeves
Oh,
in
All right.
because
yes.
now
So
I've seen some of these Facebook rants, so like
Listen.
yeah,
I
yeah.
read them because I'm just like, I hope I'm not one of these today.
All right. So when I go back, all right. So when my biggest pet peeve is that from a judging standpoint, hardly ever does the music effect judge need to be talking about pitch and like that. That's such a tiny little aspect of music effect. And if the music effect judge is talking about tempo tears and pitch, um, and tone quality, like that's 5% of why the music is not effective. But that should also be 5% of your commentary. Like
Mm.
if there are 4 loud phrases in a row, that's a big deal on a music effect tape. And if the alto saxes are not in tune, that's a little deal on a music effect tape, you know. Um, and a lot of times you'll hear a music effect tape that's just another performance tape, and then at the end of their sentence, they try to throw in a few words to make it to justify why they're saying that on an effect tape. But that's just I assume the same happens a lot with visual, but I don't think it does. I think the typical music effect judge um, hasn't done a lot of training, and they're not aware of show design, and they don't see it from an audience perspective. They see it from a band director's perspective, whereas the
Mm.
typical visual effect judge is probably designed some shows of their own. A typical music visual effect judge has probably got some pretty good guard chops and some pretty good winter chops. I hear a lot of music effect tapes that are still basically music performance. That's
Mm.
certainly a pet peeve.
Yeah, I noticed that last week we had our general effect judge last week, not this past weekend, but our first show out. He made it a point to say, this is a little bit out of my caption, but he said something about pitch. But that was like the only time. But he
Yeah,
acknowledged, like, this is not where I'm supposed to be. And
yeah,
all his commentary was just about, okay, pacing's good, this is good, I like the different styles and all of this stuff. And everything was meant towards the musical design.
awesome.
And unless it was just, and it was a good person, I'll tell you who it is after the podcast.
Yeah,
But it was it was like, oh, this is an effect tape. Like, I actually got good comments about how the music was constructed
yeah,
for a particular show.
yeah,
So I think you're right. It is a lot of times, especially with the panels that we get at our local shows. With I always like going to shows where I don't know anybody on the panel.
hmm
I feel a lot better about things because I know we're going to get a good read or a fair read at least.
Yeah.
And some people just think music effect is just how loud your impact moments were. I'm like, well, an impact moment can be soft too. Like these are things. So I'm with you on
All
that
right.
one.
Another pet peeve. There's a lot of folks that are jumping on the field mic bandwagon that don't
Oh
really
boy.
understand how to use them.
Oh boy.
And I've been at some rehearsals this week, and one thing I've found that I think really helps is if you can get all the field mics, set them up to where you can mute them all with one touch of a button. All right, and then you start a phrase with no field mic in, and then you hit unmute. And if you barely notice that you've turned them on, then you're doing it right. But if when you unmute them, there's obviously a difference, then you're doing it wrong. And you've got to have the field mics panned so that if something's happening on stage right, it's coming out of the stage right speakers. There have been a lot of times where I'll think I'm hearing the trumpets over on side 2, and I don't see any trumpets on side 2, and I realize they're right in front of the mic on side 1, but they don't have the channels panned. So like literally what I'm seeing is not what I'm hearing because I'm not hearing the stereo effect. That's a problem with field mics. I just think it's something that we haven't caught up to yet. People see the best in the activity using them, and so they assume we've got to use them. And I've heard a lot of it done poorly just in the last 2 years.
Man, I see BOA put up their little rule about it.
It'll catch up. We'll catch up to what we need. Oh man, I hear so another pet peeve, and I think this happens to all of us. I was certainly guilty of this. Thinking too much about a deep show concept. We really need to kind of leave that to Blue Devils and Broken Arrow. Do you know what I'm saying? Like those are the folks that are setting the standard of the activity, and they're like if Broken Arrow or Tarpon wants to talk about mankind's struggle with self-acceptance and they do that through the perfect Blink 182 song, they're probably going to do it, and we're all going to be crying and thinking this show is so beautiful. But for 99% of the world, move well, play well. And if the concept is Ced's walls are beige and there's a Christmas tree, that is enough concept. Like if they're moving well, if the kids are standing up straight and their feet in time, that's enough visual concept. And I think a lot of times I'm certainly guilty of this. A lot of times, I'll sit there and stress about, well, if this is the image on the ballad silk, does that really connect to the narration that we had? And it just doesn't matter. If the kids are standing up straight and their feet are in time, the visual is going to be good. And if they play in tune with a good sound and it's in time, the music scores are going to be good. And it doesn't matter. You hear these arrangers that are so proud of, well, listen, in this one measure, you can hear the mellophones playing theme B that came up in the opener, and they're bringing it back in the closer. And I'm like, that's really tough to pick up on a first read. And if it's out of tune and out of time, it just doesn't matter. I think that's the biggest thing our activity could grow on. Show concepts are really secondary to just doing it right.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah,
be quiet on that one, cause
said in the mini design meetings, like, well, we need to. What if I was like, I'm sorry, but where we were competing, they're not going to get all of this esoteric stuff. I say it all the time, and I love my state. I love Kentucky, but 9 out of the 10 judges, they're not even. Yeah, they hear the concept of the show, and then it's whatever.
It's fun and it's cute if you get every song to have the same word in it. Like the last year I taught at Henderson, I thought so much about how can we have the word ride. Like the opener is Short Ride, and the ballad is Ticket to Ride, and the closer is Sam Hazo's Ride. But that didn't matter if the kids couldn't move and play.
Yeah. And where we are doing that right now. I mean, you've watched our video of our show, and all the songs have the word spin in it except for one. Yeah. But yeah, but I tell the kids like, hey, ain't none of this gonna matter if we can't tongue
Mm-mm.
together. Like,
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't matter if you have lights and smoke
I swear.
and a live animal on the field if you can't march and play. That that's what it boils down to.
And I'll say that every near any good judge is going to see past the stuff. And I'll talk to people about how, like, of course you're going to set an impression within the first, honestly, coming on the field. And it's not like,
Mm-hmm.
do
Yeah.
they march on the field? You can walk on the field, but if everything comes on the field and it's not professional, and then you can be like, okay, maybe this band's going to be at an 80, at a 16, or maybe this band's going to be at a 12, a 60, but they're going to be in that range. And then as the show develops, you can be like, oh, yeah, they are an 80, or they are a 60. But every good judge is going to notice that, and that's, if you come out with one range, you're making it. Do I have to increase from that, or do I get pulled down from that? And so I think just the professionalism of how the kids are doing their stuff, it matters, but it doesn't matter as much as just doing the show well.
yeah,
No good judges are going to be swayed in the end by the stuff and the props and the costuming. All that stuff is cool, and it might set a first impression, but every good judge is going to eventually get to the right number.
I mean,
Because
I
that's
think
because
we
that's in,
go ahead.
I was gonna say because that's interesting because if you talk to certain fans or I guess just anybody in band related in general, they'll the thought process now is like if you don't have that, your show isn't going to do anything, regardless of the playing or not. I feel like a lot of groups are having that kind of mindset. And it's why you're seeing so many groups pull out so much random stuff nowadays. It's like and I think it's weird because I know especially like in indoor, you'll get some groups that go out there with not a thing on the floor and dominate.
Yeah,
And then
I think also though, like, I think the quality of judging in indoor is better. I think you're typically going to have a better panel at most indoor shows. And so a group that does really well, they may not need stuff. And I think there's some weak judges in the fall, and they're capable of being tricked into seeing all the stuff.
mm-hmm,
Um, and I think all the stuff only gives you your range at the beginning, and then a good judge is gonna adjust. Like, oh, they look, if some group rolls out with five marimbas and they've got this amazing sound system and these custom top uniforms, and then they just play and move terribly, then you're like, okay, they're not that good. Um,
mm-hmm,
but the other can also happen. Some group will come out just looking rough, and you're getting a rough vibe from them, and then they play and move well. A good judge is going to have an open mind to be like, oh yeah, these kids are doing it, and reward them with that. I'd say there's probably some judges that fall victim to not 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 being able to make that change in their brain. You know,
mm. Do you would you if we're talking designing now, so if you're so giving advice to somebody to design a show, would you lean more to say, "Hey, man, we don't need these props," or I'm going
no,
to try to design a show that needs prop?
I I don't think the props should. I don't think the show should be dependent on the props, but I think the look it gives you is going to set a mindset for the audience and the judges that's worth it. Shoddy, thrown together props where we still see the
Mm-hmm,
painted two by fours,
mm-hmm,
that's worse than having no props. But having a professional looking prop set up, good looking uniforms, I think that's gonna put the mindset, that's gonna put the audience and the judges in a mindset to reward them, and the community digs that. Like,
mm-hmm,
the community sees here's our look. And
Yeah.
the same way semis don't really matter at all. But if you've
Right.
got a big painted semi rolling up and
They
it's got
love
all
it.
the years you made finals,
They love it.
man, mom and dad and grandma love that stuff. And I could
Mm-hmm.
care less. Like when I'm
Yeah.
walking through a parking lot, I do not care as the judge. But the community digs that, and there's some value in that. If I was given advice, and I've literally given this advice, I would find the coolest prop you can find and then contact that band director and be like, my dude, I want to buy that. And
Mm.
then start with the prop. And then once you've started with the coolest prop you can find, then find a good arranger and find something they've already written that's not going to cost you a ton, and
Mm.
find that arrangement, and say you're going to use that music, because any music can fit just about any prop. You
Mm.
know, you could find a prop and be like, there's a turtle that's been a part of about 20 different shows. I saw it once with a Bell Brooks show. There's this huge turtle prop that is going around the world, but you
Mm.
just buy the prop, and then after that, then you find the right wind book, and then after that, you get the drill written to it. But honestly, you could start with the prop, and there's so many props out there that are well done, and dads would dig that. They would dig renting a U-Haul truck to drive down to somewhere in Mississippi or some indie suburb, and you buy a prop, and rather than having them sit there and build a prop that you're not sure is going to work or roll out on the turf, start with the prop, one that's already been built and it works, and then get a wind book that is really well written.
That's
All right,
what's up.
need to call mandarins right now. Get
Oh
that one
Yep.
boy.
Shut up.
spinning.
Oh my.
Get out. Get out.
Trip to California. Here we go.
Uh-huh.
You know that those have already been bought.
Oh yeah, they were
Some
bought
schools
They
already
were
as
bought
soon
bought
as they were
day
them.
one.
debuted.
Which drum corps had the big spoon slide this year? Was it
That
blue?
was
Blue
Blue
stars.
Stars. Blue
Blue Stars.
Stars.
I saw that yesterday, Saturday. I saw that Saturday. As soon as they rolled it out,
Already.
and I didn't see a lot of world class this summer because of traveling, and I did all the open class shows. But as soon as I rolled it out, everyone else in the press box was like, "Oh, we know where that came from." And
Yeah.
I was in Indy, and I'm sure Blue Stars. A lot of their home base stuff is there in Indy, so it was logical. But yeah, reusing props is definitely the way to go.
Man.
Hit the lottery. Well, fellas, you guys anything else? I always feel like I ask like a ton of questions on these things.
I'm just sitting here like a sponge.
This- yeah.
Right?
And that's
Like
basically
you,
that's what it is, man.
like
It's like
you're
this
talking
is a
about,
learning experience
just so
too.
many things you're bringing up, and I did have my little notepad writing stuff down because it's like I I'm writing my group's drill for the first. I'm writing a show for the first time, period. And so, like some of the things you're saying, I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense. I wish I'd known that in June.
Yeah.
But like,
Mhm.
you're talking about the whole when you have your numbers type deal. Well, we were supposed to have 20 guard, and now we're down, and we got down to 15 in one day of camp. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, glad I didn't really heavily start on this because, and we were supposed to have two more trumpets and tubas, and they didn't show, and it's just kind of one of those things. You roll with
It,
it, but
it's really tough, and then you try to throw in a kid at the last minute, and a lot of times if that kid's a rookie,
hmm
then they're over their head.
yeah, or
It's it,
somebody's
it's
younger sibling that's gonna be there anyway, so you're like, here, hold this trumpet, like,
yeah. Every other activity does not have the customization of marching band.
no,
Orchestra, choir, concert band, show choir, musical theater, like everyone else uses literature. Their content has been written for sometimes centuries. In
hmm
marching band, the fact that we have to use custom content, whether it's the show or the music, the drill, because our situation changes,
hmm
it's a real challenge to the activity, which is one reason why the top level, the top 1% of bands, they know their numbers because they're going to have 20 alternates, and
Mm.
drum corps know their numbers. They know
yep,
right now, whether it's Crown or Boston or even Gold or Spartans, they basically know their numbers, and
yep.
they basically know their talent level, and they can make those adjustments already. That's one reason why the summer activity is so refined.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, this year was nuts. I seen more completed shows in the first couple of weeks. I was like,
Yeah,
geez.
Yeah, of course
yeah.
we're not
Hmm.
playing around this year.
No, there's the activity. I feel like in the last 3 or 4 years, the activity has gone to a place that bands can't really keep up. You know what kids are doing in the summer, visually
Yep.
and musically, bands can't really do. And there's certainly some amazing kids playing. All the Grand Nat semifinal bands, those 30 or 40 bands, and the 15 or 20 that don't ever come to Grand Nats. There's 60, 70 great marching bands in the country, but they can't do what the top half of DCI open class are doing.
Hmm.
Not even beginning to talk about what the world class cores are doing. But there's 20
Hmm.
or 25 cores that are just their content. And you watch a video, if you watch a video on mute of the 15th place core, and then watch a video on mute of the 10th place band in the world, just the velocity of the drill is so
Hmm.
different. Like, oh of course it's a different activity. The rehearsal time, the talent, the age of the kids, but the stuff they do in the summer is just unreal.
Hmm.
I agree. Well, Stephen, it has been an absolute blast because, I mean, it didn't even, that hour flew.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 It flew. Definitely would love to have you back, um, especially since you kind of do the winter thing too. I mean, you're a year rounder. You can talk about anything and all that good stuff. So it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. I know I learned a whole lot
Hmm.
and always
I've
continue
enjoyed it.
on. Yeah,
It's an activity I could talk about for hours for sure.
Same.
yeah.
All
Hmm.
of
It's
us.
it's it's such a cool
And
thing.
we
It really
and we
is.
have.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we have. So you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. We're also on Spotify. If you liked what you heard, make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe, and you know, if you picked up any tips or hints or anything that may help out you or your marching band, let us know in the comments below. But so it's been awesome. Chris missed a good one.
Hmm.
He's gonna be jelly. Um, but he had to take care of the kids. His daddy did it tonight.
Yep.
So so for Chris and Zach and Will and Steven, my name is Cedric. This has been episode number 53 of On the Back Hash. If you haven't yet, go support a local marching band show. If you're in the Peoria area and you see Mr. Page, say hi.
Right, right.
and yeah, so from us to you guys, take care, and we are that out.
Out.